The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Reproduction or dissemination, other than for the purpose of education or information without the express written permission of the Phoenix Research Institute or Nova Society Media, is strictly prohibited.
Welcome back to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with my panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bound. Today, we will be answering listener emails, and we have one from Linda, who lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Linda asks, the SCOTUS just ruled that Trump can use the 1798 Aliens Enemies Act to deport immigrants. What does the panel think this might mean? And do you think we will see more people disappearing in the coming weeks? Mark? Scott?
Will we see more people disappearing in the coming weeks? Absolutely. I don't think there's really any doubt about that. This is a trend. I think we're going to see people targeted like we've seen before. And they're being targeted for something that is ridiculous. I mean, for a tattoo, the one that was deported, because it's a gang tattoo. No, it isn't. It's an autism awareness tattoo, you morons. The thing that gets me about the act says you can do this if you are at war. And once again, I'll go back to the same argument I've had. Only the Congress can declare war. The president can take actions. He could take military actions as a commander-in-chief, but he cannot declare war. And therefore, if a war has not been declared by Congress, why would this act be even valid? Because that's one of the things it requires. And I do not see how the august legal geniuses of the Supreme Court sort of miss that argument totally.
SCOTUS also just ruled that before Trump and his administration deport anybody else, that person has to have due process. Do you think that they're going to listen to that edict? And this is the Supreme Court 9-0. My immediate thought was, I don't think they're going to give anybody due process. I think they're just going to continue doing what they're doing. What do you think?
Well, all right. So I understand the point of that. And here's the issue that you run into. They would have to use a very, and you always hear this whenever you watch like a crime show, Law and Order and this and that, habeas corpus. Show me the body is really what we're talking about. They would have to use the habeas corpus clause. That would be their defense from this. It exists, but it is very rarely a successful argument being made. And let's understand, these are some people where English is not their first language. These are some people that do not have access to attorneys. And even if they do, trying to use habeas corpus doesn't work a lot of the times. So, yeah, okay, in theory, yes, there is a way for the due process to happen. The person would have to use habeas corpus, which doesn't work all the time. Even if you're a lawyer who speaks good English, it doesn't work half the time. So I understand what they're saying. Okay. But that avenue that they're thinking up is just an avenue, and they all should know it. These guys all went to law school, for Christ's sakes. They all should know it. It is an absolutely uphill battle defense. But you've got to get it before somebody. You got to get a lawyer to be able to get it before somebody. In theory, they're right. In practice, absolutely not.
So then what you're saying is that the Trump administration, they can say, well, we gave everybody due process. But they don't have to do it.
They don't have to do anything, Brooke. They don't have to do a thing. It is up to the person who is being detained to invoke the habeas corpus.
Oh, I see.
And if you don't do it, let's face it, if you go to court and you got a really good case and the prosecutor is prosecuting you and your lawyer's an idiot, doesn't bring up objections when he should, it's not the prosecutor's job to sit and say, hey, Your Honor, he should have brought up an objection onto this. It's not that prosecutor's function. That's your lawyer's function. So, yeah, all the Trump administration always has to do is keep doing exactly what you're doing and see where it goes. But the Supreme Court's attitude is there is a due process right and avenue there. What they didn't say is that avenue is like putting 10 pounds of crap in a 5-pound bag.
So then the Trump administration is not required to bring each person into a court before putting them on an airplane and providing them with an attorney and having the attorney see to it that the person speaks Spanish or whatever language and speaks to a judge.
Correct. They don't have to do anything. Just do what they're doing.
Wow. Okay.
I think in other words, you got to have in their mind, you got to have a smarter criminal. You got to have a criminal who isn't even a citizen, or maybe he has a green card or whatever, who actually understands the law. Now, if you're going to deport somebody that maybe is going to Yale Law School or Harvard Law School and is in their third year, yeah, they got a chance. But your average everyday, nope.
Okay. Well, I noticed that even with Mahmoud Khalil or Khalil Mahmoud, I'm sorry, I can't remember which is his first name and which is his surname. His wife, who is a dentist, was saying, calling their attorney, saying, the attorney says this, the attorney says that, and saying, excuse me, and where are you taking him? And they refused to answer her, and no one had a badge, and no one had ID, and no one showed her anything. No one would speak to the lawyer, and these were ICE agents. And that's somebody who has an attorney already. And I mean, they didn't take the guy away and deport him to his home country. They didn't deport him, but instead they didn't even take him to New Jersey. They do take him to Louisiana with no phone call to his attorney or anything like that. And his wife at least was there and is smart enough to know to call her lawyer. So then what the Supreme Court has said basically just they may as well not even have said it.
The important thing to know about the Alien Enemies Act is it's only been invoked 3 times prior to this. War of 1812, World War I, and World War II. But a conflict had to exist. A war had to be going on. Congress is the only body in the United States government that can declare war. A president can't say, oh, we're at war, just arbitrarily. That has to be declared by the Congress of the United States. It has not.
Well, thank God we haven't had a war since World War I, World War II, because that was the last time that a president bothered to ask.
Right. Exactly. I mean, Bush tried to do it. Bush II tried to do it, but was unsuccessful because he was able to go against the axis of evil, or whatever it was that he was calling it. But no true war was ever declared by the Congress, because really, who are you declaring against? Declaring against, terrorist group. It's not a state. So that kind of muddled up that little thing. What?
Right. That was a war against the concept of terrorism.
Correct. So in my mind, the Alien Enemies Act doesn't apply because there is no war. Who are we at war with other than ourselves? Again, I think the Supreme Court missed that. That was a swing and a miss by the 5 conservatives.
Yeah. So it's a little bit complicated. What the Supreme Court said was that there needs to be due process. But at the same time, they threw out this particular lawsuit because it was filed, they said, in the wrong court. And if you filed it in the right court, which would be Texas, according to them, and I think they were pretty explicit about that, because this is where the people were held temporarily, that you would have to file the legal challenge in Texas. And of course, Texas's judges are notoriously conservative or dismissive of the Constitution, and that they would rule against them. And unless they were somehow quick enough to move it up the chain toward the Supreme Court, they would be removed. And of course, the administration has also claimed that once they're in El Salvador, there's nothing we can do about it, which is ridiculous on its face, because they're still essentially in your custody, and as long as you have custodial control of them, even if they're in a foreign country, you are responsible for them. So I think that as I said before about Trump, declaring victory, he's done that. He didn't actually get a victory here, but he's declaring victory. But the ACLU is also claiming victory in this, because they're saying that the court has upheld the idea of due process, and that they need to get these every single one of them. I think it was 279 or something like that, 235. I forget the number of people who were shipped to this CCOT prison down in El Salvador. It has now been declared that that 180 of them or so have no gang ties, have no criminal record here or anywhere else, which the Trump administration says is proof of their nefariousness, which is like catch-22 insane, right? The mere fact that they have no criminal record just shows what amazing criminals they are, which is like crazy on its face, I'm sure, right?
The president of the United States has a longer criminal record than these,
yes, he does.
People.
That's absolutely true. And that they have to return everybody who's in CCOT back to the United States and have them go through due process. And if they're criminals, by all means, ship them out. Ship them. If you can't ship them to Venezuela because Venezuela won't take them, we don't have a deal with Venezuela and prisoners, then, or even non-criminal types. Venezuela is not cooperating with us to take back their citizens who are being rejected here. They've got to go somewhere else. Okay, so if they're hardened criminals and you've got proof of that, send them to El Salvador and let them rot in this horrible prison. But that's not the case with, a sizable number. The vast majority of them are not criminals. And you can't do this to them. They cannot be held without due process. And of course, they're saying it's a fait accompli, but it can't be. Like, we can't have that. Because if you do, let's just, stretch that out, right? Follow that path. Then you or I, U.S.-born citizens, can be snatched off the street and sent out to CCOT to live the rest of our lives without due process in the worst prison imaginable. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. Is that really what you want for the United States of America? I think even the strongest Trump supporters would have to admit that this is not, their idea of justice in America. Although who knows? They probably could still go along with it. I don't know.
Only if they're the ones who are taken themselves. I mean, this is just like Stalin's gulag. The people who were there knew that they hadn't done anything wrong. But the other people who were there along with them must have, because Stalin was always right. And you couldn't say that Stalin had made a mistake. The government had made a mistake, because the government was Stalin, and Stalin never made mistakes. It's the same thing. I have a question. So when Trump was campaigning, he was saying, well, everybody who is an undocumented criminal, we're going to get rid of all the criminals. And the Americans were for that. And of course, Trump and his people never defined what a criminal was. What exactly is an alien enemy? And I'm just wondering how far that definition can be stretched, because as you were saying, Scott, you, me, anybody who disagrees can be a left-wing, radical, lunatic, dangerous professor who's ruining the country and who hates America and so on and so forth. I'm just curious how far an alien enemy can be stretched, the definition, narrow the definition of what an American is, that if you're not Christian and you're not a Trumper, then you're an alien. I don't know. What do you think?
Okay, so first of all, the Fifth Amendment, which is the one that provides for due process, does not specify citizens. It specifies persons. So everybody has the right to due process. Now, who you want to consider an alien enemies, I think, is up to the beholder. We saw Japanese and Italian Americans as alien enemies during World War II, right? And the Japanese case is very well known. The Italian case a little less so. It affected fewer people.
And Germans also.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that. I know about the Italian part of this because my wife is Italian and she gets some kind of Italian magazine that there was this article about a guy who lives not far away from us whose family was incarcerated. I had not heard that German Americans were incarcerated. I know a lot of, I think German Americans is the number one, Germany was the number one place that American citizens came from, more so than England or even Italy or Russia or wherever. In that period of time when America got filled up with immigrants in like the 1800s, 1900s. So there would be a lot of them to remove. And instead, I mean, as long as you, I suppose, declare loyalty or something like that to the United States of America, when you take your citizenship vow, you should be exempt from that. But let's just take the two that I'm sure of, or the one even. Let's just focus on the Japanese. That FDR was too nervous about Japanese Americans and threw a lot of them in concentration camps, which is completely wrong. And the Supreme Court has, I believe, after the fact said that that was wrong, right? In the decision about that in 1948, they said the question as to whether a person is restrained is in fact an alien enemy may be reviewed by the courts. And that is exactly what the Supreme Court said on Monday. It has to be reviewed. There needs to be judicial review. So the ruling on Monday was very ambiguous and can be claimed as victory on both sides, because on the one hand, you're saying you are entitled to due process and you are entitled to notice. Another part of it that I think the Trump people have ignored, right, is that you have to have reasonable notice that you are going to be sent to prison. And they were not obviously given that reasonable notice. Like, they had no time to get their affairs in order. And I don't know where most of the people came from, but where they were rounded up to was the El Val detention facility in Texas. And they should have been held there until their cases could be reviewed before being sent to CCOT in El Salvador. And some of the, as we've talked about here before, some of the criteria that made them declared criminals are things like tattoos, which I keep telling my kids don't get tattoos. But yeah, just having a tattoo or wearing a certain kind of baseball cap would raise a red flag to ICE or whoever Tom Homan's gang that couldn't shoot straight feels like doing that day. It is an extremely troubling, right, situation that they've actually come up with a alien enemy validation guide that looks at social media posts guilty associated with known gang members, which, I don't know who I associate with, but I'm pretty sure none of them are gang members. But there is no ability for the United States government to just whip people off the streets, send them down to Texas for a couple of days, and then shoot them over to El Salvador, to the most heinous prison in the world, without any kind of due process. I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
And I don't know where this is going to lead, whether whether every single one of them in that prison needs to be back. I know that they did that with Guantanamo Bay, that right now there are no alien enemies supposedly in Guantanamo Bay because they've all been shipped back, and that was basically nothing more than a photo op. And that should be the thing that happens here in this case. But whatever it is, we are clearly moving down this path toward an extreme government that takes advantage of a lack of laws or ambiguities in the law, and is right now turning that on foreigners living here, but will soon probably be turning that on U.S. citizens as well.
Yeah. And, this is from the BrennanCenter.org. Suggest people check that out. This is, under what conditions can the president invoke the Aliens Enemies Act? So this is a quote. The president may invoke the Aliens Enemies Act in times of declared war or when a foreign government threatens or undertakes an invasion or predatory incursion against the U.S. territory. The The Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the power to declare war. So the president must wait for a democratic debate and a congressional vote to invoke the Alien Enemies Act based on a declared war. But now here's where we get into the ambiguity. But the president need not wait for Congress to invoke the law based on a threatened or ongoing invasion or predatory incursion. The president has inherent authority to repel these kinds of sudden acts, an authority that necessarily implies the discretion to decide when an invasion or predatory incursion is underway. That's how vague this is. So what he's, basically saying, because of the way these laws are written, and let's face it, these laws, a lot of the United States laws are written so vague for interpretation. What is the invasion? Oh, it's the MS-13 is the invasion. MS-13 is a gang. MS-13 is not a sovereign nation. What is the predatory incursion? And for both of these, of course, there's an argument. Well, maybe there's a predatory incursion. My comment to both of these would be predatory incursion and invasion, as it relates to Enemies Act, as it relates to war, must be conducted by another sovereign nation, not any group. Going back to the George Bush II, where they wouldn't declare war simply because it was a battle against, as the ideology of what they thought was terrorism at the time. There was no country, no sovereign nation that they could pin their hat on. They can't do it here either. You could say, well, they're from Venezuela, and they're from Mexico, and they're from, in some cases, England, and they're from all these other places. I mean, which one of these countries are you really thinking you're going to declare war on? Which one of them? And unless you could point to a country where you can say, yes, there's a predatory incursion or an invasion being undertaken by the authority of that sovereign nation, that other sovereign nation, I don't think this applies. And as I say, I think the Supreme Court missed that one. So hopefully we did answer that.
Either that or the Supreme Court is deliberately enabling what Trump wants to do, which is what occurs to me. I mean, they must know the law, the five of them.
Oh yeah, but it doesn't change the fact that it's all interpretable. That is English is not a precise language.
I understand that. I just don't understand how they can interpret that what you just read to mean that we're being invaded by anybody. I mean, we're not.
Once again, they could come out and say that I am putting a spin on the interpretation that it's not meant to be. Let's remember, English is not always the most concise language. Number two, these laws are written by lawyers who are in the Congress. Why are they in the Congress? Because they weren't very good lawyers. If you were a really good lawyer, you sure as heck wouldn't be in the Congress. You'd probably be making a heck of a lot more money being a really great lawyer. So, I mean, this is where our problem lies. And it's,
Right, but okay. So there's two things, if you don't mind me just popping in. This has got nothing. This has something to do with the last conversation that we had, not this one. Trump just placed a 90-day pause on global tariffs, on most of the global tariffs.
Wow,
well, that's good.
Okay, so
no wonder the S&P is going up. The S&P is now going up green. Right. Before it was going down red. Anyway.
Go ahead. And more to point here for the conversation that we're actually having here, a federal judge in Texas has issued a temporary restraining order barring the Trump administration from using a rarely invoked wartime statute to deport Venezuelan migrants who are being held there to El Salvador. So the ACLU got this one right somehow or another. This judge, I don't know who it is. Let me see if I can get a name. Have succeeded apparently in getting them to stop deporting these people without due process.
Well, the question is, will they listen? And the other question that I had was, when you say reasonable notice, of course, reasonable is also subjective. And I'm just wondering what reasonable.
Well, you can I think what you're going to hear, the name of the judge is Fernando Rodriguez Jr.
Good for him.
Oh, well.
Oh,
Then they're
man.
going to argue, since it's not Matthew Kaczmarek, what he has to say doesn't matter. And
Oh my God. Hey, Fernando, how about going with Frank Roderick or something like that?
That's right.
Because you're going to get killed for this by the Trumpies. He's a radical, foreign
Exactly.
judge. What did he say about that guy who was born in Indiana? That judge who ruled against him in the Trump University case or whatever it was.
He's a nasty man.
Yes.
He's what do you expect from a Mexican? God.
Yeah,
Oh well.
exactly.
Somebody had to do it. Thank you, Judge. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I agree. Then they'll go running to Matthew Kaczmarek, who's got the little district in northern Texas, who will rule that this other judge in Texas doesn't know what he's talking about. And Kaczmarek is the one that the Republicans always go to because he's the one who always rules in their favor. And they love him.
Yeah. The judge shopping, man. Whew.
Yep.
That is something about this system that probably wasn't meant to actually happen.
No, I don't think so.
No.
Right.
But wait, can
Go ahead, Scott.
We have a couple more minutes on this, can't
sure.
we? We got a question from a listener. We need to answer it as fully as we can.
As fully as possible.
Please
do our due diligence.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm a little antsy because the Mets are playing right now. But go ahead.
Okay. All right. We'll have to catch the later innings when the bullpen comes in, and that's the best part. And when did you think you'd be saying that? The bullpen has just been so good. Certainly not last year. Anyhow, apparently yesterday there was what's called the Border Security Expo in Phoenix, Arizona. Okay. And the keynote speaker was Tom Homan, who said, one of his usual things. The idea of this expo is to showcase for many companies that went and took out booths or whatever, or paid for the ticket, what opportunities there are for them in the deportation of Americans, probably ultimately, but right now, immigrants to the country, or 10-year immigrants from 10 years ago or whatever. Tom Homan in his keynote speech said, "We need to buy more beds. We need more airplane flights. And I know a lot of you are here for that reason. Let the badge and guns do the badge and gun stuff. Everything else, let's contract out." And the acting director of ICE, Todd Lyons, said yesterday that he envisions lines of trucks arresting and detaining immigrants, much like Amazon does. He says, I'm going to quote, "We need to get better at treating this like a business, like Amazon Prime, but with human beings." So I want to throw that out there. And I wonder if either of you, and I know Mark, your wife is Jewish, whether you've seen the HBO movie Conspiracy.
Yes.
About the Wannsee Convention.
Yes.
This sounds an awful lot like that.
Yes.
In that one, it was the railroad system that crisscrossed across Europe, and the guy who plays Himmler says, Heinrich says, "The trains are ready to roll. Your job is to fill them." And these guys are more or less saying something real similar to that, and talking to business people about the opportunities that you have to aid us in our desire to get the trucks rolling and get immigrants out of the country. And it also invokes, at least for me, the memory of Portland in 2020, when U.S. Attorney General Barr had sent uninsigniated police, mostly from the Bureau of Prisons and some other places, to Portland in unmarked vans, who drove around picking up basically anybody who was wearing black and throwing them into the back of these vans and arresting them without due process, without making a charge, without explaining to them what they had done wrong. and holding them, in some cases just to release them a short while later somewhere else in the city of Portland, not where they were picked up from, and in some cases holding them for several days without any explanation or anything like that. Like, this is the kind of lawless police activity that we need to start getting used to in this country. And I, for one, do not ever want to get used to it.
And you're right. Actually, Conspiracy was in 2001, a movie starring Kenneth Branagh. Very good. He starred as Reinhard Heydrich. And, a lot of these movies, they say, gee, is it, based on real life? And this is actually one that is very true to the events. The event, it was the Wannsee Conference. It was held by Heydrich, Eichmann, and a few of the other notorious Nazis. And the Wannsee Conference was an event that took place on the 20th of January, 1942. And it is the dramatization lasts exactly as long as the meeting lasted, 90 minutes. So it is very, very true. It's, a lot of people will say, gee, I watched, Braveheart. That's really not the way it happened. No, it isn't. But if you watch Conspiracy, that is exactly the way it happened. And you're going to hear some very interesting comments by some of the people around that table from different industries and different areas within the Nazi regime. So, yeah, definitely check that out. And you're right, Scott. It does sound like it. It sounds exactly like it.
It's messed up.
Yep.
That was the first thing that popped into my mind was trains and the cars and the industrialization of genocide. No, I don't want to get used to it, and to think that the United States is going to turn into this type of country is really sickening. And to turn this into a business?
Yeah, it's a business. Big business opportunity.
There you go.
Well, I hope we answered, Linda. I hope we answered your question, and thank you for your question. Do stay with us on the Nova Society, and do stay safe. And we'll see you again next time.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or a comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Phoenix Research Group, an independent research consortium offering social political issue solutions to NGOs and international government agencies through multidisciplinary, nonpartisan, and unbiased research. The Phoenix Research Group is a division of the Phoenix Research Institute, the producer of the Nova Society podcast.